So it's not just for the people who already understand cash flow. They're really hoping to kind of turn advisory services into something that everyone has access to.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a great continuation of the one that we heard last week. Our guest is the owner of Bonfire Bookkeeping and has been a longtime member of the Successful Bookkeeper community, Lisa Channell. Welcome back to the show in this next segment of our episode. So Lisa, we did an episode and it was just chock full of great value. So we decided to have part 1 and part 2 for the very first time on the history. How's it feel being part of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast history?
Oh my goodness. I am actually thrilled to pieces. And I think it might be a sign that I talk a lot.
Well, thank you. You share a lot, and that is extremely valuable. And so let's continue on with this episode in part 2 of Lisa Channell. For you, it was about coming to the realization that things had to change, and you did something about it. You didn't know what that would look like, but you did something about it. You took action, and you were fortunate to find the right mentor, Ron Baker. But often when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yes.
And so it might not, the listener, your teacher might not be Ron Baker, but it will be a teacher when you're ready. And, people often think, I got to fix my pricing like it's going to happen overnight. This was 6-7 months of continual application of thoughts, ideas, strategies. What were some of those key things that you did that made the biggest difference?
Giving myself permission to make mistakes. That was the single biggest thing that changed everything for me. Because before I was working with Ron Baker, I knew about Ron Baker. So I had actually listened to the IPBC webinars that he had done. I was fascinated by the concept of package pricing, did not know how to implement it, and value pricing really tied in with the package pricing. And I just kept stalling out over and over again. In my heart, I knew that package pricing was where I wanted to go. There were so many benefits to it. Mostly, I don't know about anybody else, but I really resonated with Debbie's story in the E-Myth Bookkeeper when she talked about writing up the invoice and kind of, I'm making a motion with my hand, but sliding the invoice under a stack of paper towards the client and then basically letting them pick up the stack of paper and walk away and just praying or crossing your fingers that they would pay that invoice. Do you remember that story?
I do.
I honestly, I remember where I was even when I read that. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is me. I was on a plane, and there are other people who feel the same way. This is not the end point of the journey. It's just once you become aware that you want to change something, it's the starting point. So even if you don't get to work with Ron Baker, there's so many simple ways to get started, and giving yourself permission to make mistakes was the thing that I no longer had to be perfect to have the perfect packages, have the perfect items listed on the package. Just do it, hope for the best, course correct. If it doesn't work, course correct. If it does work, course correct. And that's really how it started, the momentum started to take place. The confidence started to change. It can be really scary to do pricing in a different way than you're used to. And I started with, people go back and forth about this all the time, but when you start to change your pricing, do you change your pricing for brand new clients, or do you change your pricing for clients that already trust and love you? And I think that it can go both ways, whatever you feel comfortable with. But for me, it was much easier to change my pricing for brand new to me clients. And to date, every single time I do up a proposal with those packages, I change something on the packages. No client is the same. No proposal is the same. They're not meant to be, but it gives you the opportunity to course correct at every single iteration of your pricing.
Yeah. So it's a continual improvement.
Yeah.
Wow. What a journey. Some interesting milestones with number one, immersing yourself in knowledge that already exists today, readily available. YouTube, free videos, yes. Webinars, books. Ron has a book. Yes. There's other pricing books out there. You immersed yourself into it and got the foundational stuff. So you weren't showing up to the teacher asking the basic questions. You had the basic knowledge. You could ask the advanced questions. That's accelerating your success. I absolutely love that. And it's not necessarily changing your pricing. It's changing yourself.
Which is so hard.
Which is hard. And you can't change without some form of, what's a nice word of saying it, but movement. I was going to say, like when you go to build a muscle, you must break down the muscle for the muscle to grow. So you're breaking something down, you break it down through an activity. It's doing something that's not comfortable, that you're afraid of. And then that has you realize new things, new confidence comes from that. And it doesn't matter how you price really. I've been speaking to so many that do it so many different ways.
Yes.
It's more at the beginning important to really get that it's about your own confidence and belief in what you do and the value that you produce. The pricing and how you price just packages that value into it. So it's a good way of thinking of it is that you must value yourself and value what you do. And so that was clear, that process. But key thing there that you didn't mention, or you'd mentioned it, but I think it's very important. You had a community and an environment that supports you to ensure that you did take those extra steps, or, you push further. So it might have taken you 3 years to get where you are because you were in a program that actually had a structure in place and brought you and kept that conversation going for you and had support mechanisms for you. It had you go and break down the muscle, right? And take the things that you need to do. And then course correct. Love that. Mm-hmm. Make the mistakes. Making mistakes is actually muscle building.
Yes. And a lot of it was realizing the things that weren't working were my own barriers to entry. I guarantee there are people out there who write an invoice and love writing invoices. That is perfectly fine too. But when I realized that I was nervous and hesitated to send the invoice, I had to take out the barrier to entry. So no more invoices. So then the reason that the package pricing resonated so much with me was, if I can take out the obstacle, physically writing those invoices and waiting too long to send the invoice and just crossing my fingers to get paid, take that out of the equation altogether and tell people what your pricing is going to be up front so that they can pay you up front, which is another thing that I was not expecting. Literally no one to date has balked at me sending them a pre-authorized debit on the exact same day I send them an engagement letter. They sign the contract, they implement the pre-authorized debit that literally goes through that day. No one has ever told me no. It's astounding.
It's astounding. It really is. And it is interesting, just the whole concept of where there was a time where people did do work before they got paid. It was it was a different time. And now today it's strange not to pay before you you get something, right? It's like you sign an agreement, let's get started. It's like payment gets us started. It's like that's the sail in the boat. We put that up and we start moving, right?
But the other thing too is that it's almost like so much more transparency when I'm sure we've all had the experience of like going to get your car fixed too, and you have no idea. You're at the mercy of the mechanic. You have no idea how much it's going to be. And often I kind of feel like my clients were thinking that about like my own services too. They didn't know how much it was going to cost. And there was no conversation really. There was no transparency. So for me to change from billing an ambiguous amount and then like reducing it because I was too nervous to send the invoice or not send the invoice at all or late or whatever it was, even if I priced wrong, I was getting paid faster by just giving that transparency right at the very beginning and then having them pay me like the minute we like got the agreement in place. That was life-changing, truly life-changing.
It's worthy of the easy button.
Yeah.
It's worthy of the easy button. And Tony Robbins talks about and if you don't know Tony Robbins, of course you would, absolutely. Anybody that doesn't, Tony Robbins has amazing content and philosophies, but one of them is humans crave certainty.
Yes.
And when you provide them with certainty, it puts them in a completely different state. And so not knowing what that bill is going to be creates uncertainty. So wherever you can create certainty for people, you're going in the right direction. Certainty is good for business. Such a remarkable story. Thank you so much for sharing your journey on this. And I feel like there's a ton of things that we could talk about, and I am going to continue. We're going to go long, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
There's two things. Number one, you are working with a company called Helm, which is an app for cash flow. Maybe say a little bit about that. I know it's relatively new to the marketplace. It's new likely to you, but you are doing some things with them. Share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we have actually been working together for about a year in a fairly casual manner through the earlier part of the year. And then we were committed enough to kind of bring me on as the brand ambassador for the Helm Cashflow app. And one of the things that I love the most about that company is that they're very committed to teaching cash flow concepts. So it's owned by two accountants, very immersed in our community as well. You'll see them around in all of the Facebook groups, which I just think is so powerful and so important. And they're teaching cash flow as like to go with introducing this app. So it's not just for the people who already understand cash flow. They're really hoping to like kind of turn advisory services into something that everyone has access to, which I just think is really incredible. Like everyone talks about, I'm using air quotes, advisory services. And last year around this time, I honestly was like, what are advisory, like what makes advisory services? What is it made up of? And I still don't think I'll ever like call myself an advisor, but a lot of what goes into cash flow advisory services are solving problems, not necessarily having all the answers, which I think I particularly got confused about. I don't think advisory services is about having all the answers. I think it's about being curious enough to find out the questions. So for delivering cash flow as an advisory service, I think you have to be curious about the problems that your clients are facing and then be enough of a like lifelong learner to figure out how to solve those problems outside of the box.
Well said. Well put. Very, very nicely.
That was a bit of a ramble.
Well, I like the way you've laid it out. I mean, if you think about it, advice. The word advice, right? Advisory. If you've climbed a mountain, you know what The questions might be, it's like I've climbed this mountain. I know the questions you might want to ask about climbing this mountain. It's put you in a position where you can actually give advice about climbing the mountain. Similar to business, if you don't know the questions and deep understanding of what advice a business owner would need, it's going to be difficult to advise them. So and that curiosity is a pathway. If you want to know about the mountain, guess what? Curiosity, go up the mountain. So I really like that frame, is that being curious about business gives you as an access way to actually being able to advise other business owners. And once you figure those ones out, it's like you can do it to many others because you understand it, you know it. If you've given advice or advise somebody something, you can advise others and see the outcome even more powerful, right? We've successfully climbed this mountain. I can help you successfully climb it again.
Yeah. And it's going to be different for each client too. As I have spent more time specifically on cash flow, it seems very simple, or it is, actually I should say it is very simple. Like you can affect cash flow two different ways: make more money or spend less. It's not that complicated, but the things that start to go into it are the client's mindset, the client's experience that is playing into cash flow. Take out their barriers to entry, have conversations about what is not working. It's almost never what it seems to be on the surface, because you can really affect cash flow in very simple ways, but often the personal experience that's flavoring what's going kind of wrong or not working for that particular client, it's usually more than what it seems to be.
Absolutely. So well put as well. And to use the analogy of the mountain, every climber is different.
Yeah.
They're going to have different skill levels. They'll have different physicality, different mindsets. All of those things play out in the success of something like that. In business, the more you see it, the more you're engaged in it, the more you understand human beings, the more you can impact it. And I think too, with anything, being able to help people digest these ideas and to pay attention to it, to look at it, to have new ideas and thoughts. They bring their preset views of business and what it looks like and what it should be. Those are not necessarily correct or right. Just because someone's in business does not make them an expert. In fact, very few are. It's through trial and error. If you can impact and reduce the error, you're having a massive impact on a business's success in the future.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is too, is so far what has happened for me is that a lot of the clients that I start talking to about cash flow come from a place of like scarcity, where they automatically think I'm going to tell them to slash all of their expenses and they have to cut costs. And that can be a part of it. But my personal flavor that I bring to it is like, it's far easier to make more money than it is to go line by line through your expenses and start like cutting costs. So I think for me that I don't know if that is unique or not. I've never really watched someone else have a conversation about cash flow, but it's so effective to win people's confidence or trust by coming at it from a place of like, so do you want to make more money? Let's do that. Let's not worry about the expenses yet. If we have to go through the expenses, we will, if there's something like glaringly obvious, but let's just figure out how to either get you paid faster, increase your revenues. And often it's like, it's that thing that happens when you're, I don't know, driving to the office or whatever it is. And often I have like clients' files, like just kind of running through my mind, and a lightning bolt will happen of like, let's create a subscription box for this client. Let's create some recurring revenue for a product-based business. Like it's actually not, it can be so exciting. And I start to think of myself more as like a coach or a cheerleader or something like that versus this big meanie who's going to come and like force them to do a budget, you know?
Amazing. You know, I've often said great bookkeepers care almost more about their clients' businesses than the business owner themselves. And that is darn valuable.
Yes. And just having someone be in it with you too, fighting the good fight alongside your client. Being an entrepreneur is really lonely. No one knows what you're up against except for the people who are close enough to really feel it and see it. And there's not very many people that are privy to the entrepreneurial journey. So just having someone, like even in pricing, Ron Baker told me, you're going to feel like you need to show your expertise and give them answers right away. When you feel compelled to talk, and I personally feel compelled to talk a lot, just shut up. Because that's where the magic happens. Like, let the long pause go long enough that it feels so uncomfortable. Someone is going to fill that silence, I promise you. And if you let it be your prospect, your lead, your client, maybe you're having a conversation about cash flow, if you let that quiet happen, the things that are going to come out are the good, deep, juicy stuff that people think about in the middle of the night, that kind of stuff, you know?
And that's valuable.
Yeah.
Amazing. You know, bookkeepers make business better.
It sure is fun.
Especially when they think about it like you are and you are doing in your business. It's not for everyone. And that's, I think, something that not everybody's up for being an advisor. And it doesn't have to be, there are other things to do in the work than to be an advisor. I think that's where the sweet spot is. That's where the impact really lies, is being able to have these types of conversations with your clients and be an asset to them and be invaluable, essential service to their business, which is good for business in the long term. So, but this is curiosity needed. If you're not doing this currently, there's curiosity. You're a curious person, and it takes a curious person to actually go in and understand a business almost better than the owner does by being curious. And I think that's why so many bookkeepers are like that. They're curious about it. They want to solve problems. They want to understand it and get to the truth. And the truth is powerful. It's so valuable. And I'm sure you'll get many questions about this. And this has definitely shifted my own mindset around it. And you've presented it very nicely, I think. One last thing I said that I wanted to ask, and that was, we did mention it very subtly at the beginning of the episode, which was you hosted a podcast meetup at QuickBooks Connect Toronto, which was a fantastic event. And I am curious, there was a list of podcasts, and I think often people, busy, there's so many different things out there that you can educate yourself with. Podcasts are fantastic. I'm a little biased, of course.
Yeah, me too.
But there's other podcasts other than The Successful Bookkeeper that are super valuable, could be super valuable to our listeners. And I'd love for you to spend a little bit of time sharing some of those podcasts that came up so that our listeners can maybe take a listen and find other great sources of content for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely something I'm very passionate about. And as you mentioned before, I've been a listener of your podcast for a very long time. So again, without pandering, it's at the top of my list. On top of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast, though, there are a number of really incredible podcasts that I listen to as often as possible. So I'm just going to rattle off a bit of a list, and hopefully we could even add some into the show notes if that works.
We will definitely do that. Yes.
Awesome. And okay, here we go. So the Successful Bookkeeper, the Cloud Accounting Podcast, Grow My Accounting Practice, What's Your And, Growing Your Firm, The Authentic Accountant, The QBO Show, The Soul of Enterprise, which that one's Ron Baker, so it's a really good one. I also don't remember the name of the podcast, but Kathy Iconis, the QBO Chat or QB Chat on Twitter, she has a podcast now. And also Tamitha Denye's, she's a member of our local community, and she has a new podcast, and it has a bit of a marketing flavor to it as well. So those are the accounting ones. But then I also have a couple of small biz podcasts that I listen to all of the time as well. So Being Boss is one of them. How I Built This, Making a Business, Screw the 9 to 5. It's a personal favorite. The Carl Reeder Show, Entrepreneurship Elevated, the Gary Vee Audio Experience, The Strategy Hour, the Tony Robbins Podcast, The Tim Ferriss Show, Tribe of Mentors, Duct Tape Marketing, Side Hustle, and Quote of the Day. That's it.
Wow, that's a whole lifetime of listening right there.
Yeah, there's some really good ones. If I was going to pick my top, say, couple of each genre, I would say for news and updates to the accounting community, the Cloud Accounting Podcast is absolutely incredible and sometimes feels like a true crime show in some ways, which is my favorite. You know that. And then, of course, Soul of Enterprise is a really good one to get you thinking in a different way. I highly recommend a 3-part series that Ron Baker and Ed Kless did on subscription pricing. And then of the small business ones, the Being Boss podcast is one of my longtime favorites. And the Strategy Hour is really good as well.
Fantastic.
And now I'm done. I promise.
Wow. There's a lot there. And I'd love to put into our community under our free resources. When people sign up, they get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources. I'd love to put a couple of your favorite episodes in a post if that would be applicable. So if you want to send those over to me, I'll put them in the free resources, and it'll save people a ton of time where it's like, hey, these are 5 or 10 of my very favorite episodes. It's like going out to a buffet. You get to taste, and someone's already gone and tasted everything that is like, yeah, stay away from the broccoli, but you're going to want to have some of those chicken wings. So that would be super valuable. I think our listeners would be interested to get a flavor of what you like and what you listen to and what you find valuable in business.
Does that mean I'm allowed to put in the true crime recommendations as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You may introduce people to, yeah, exactly. You can't make it all about business. It's got to have a bit of a mix to keep you interested.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Absolutely. If I may, I just actually wanted to mention one thing about the automating of the pre-authorized debits.
Yes, please do.
I know we're kind of off that topic now, but I really want to point out that Pluto and Rotessa, Pluto is Plooto. I use Pluto myself, but Rotessa is in the same vein of automating this process for pre-authorized debits. If I was going to just hope that people took 1, maybe 2 takeaways from today, give yourself the grace to make mistakes. That is really the key, I think, to the whole pricing and even advisory services, not the ability to make mistakes, but the ability to give yourself grace to learn something new, to take on a challenge that you haven't before. I really hope that that is something that me being here will give people the courage or confidence to take a step that they wouldn't have done before. I promise you that if I can do it, you can absolutely do it. And then the second thing is just to get the automation going with something like Pluto to take out the barrier to entry.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And there's doing new things, then there's all sorts of technology that can help you do those new things more efficiently and streamlined. And so we love that conversation, and there'll be more of that. And it's one of the things that we love to do on the show is to bring new ideas, new thoughts that can help make your business better and make the experience of being in business better. Lisa, this has been absolutely fantastic. And I really, on behalf of our listeners, want to thank you for your generosity, openness, and sharing the things that you've learned along the way. It's just a true gift. So thank you.
No, thank you for having me. This was an absolute privilege. I feel honored. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.